hello creative fiends! Welcome back to Tasha's Imaginarium. Don't worry, I'm not doing anything sinister, just sewing. And this video, I'm making a pincushion voodoo doll like this. Before I continue, I would like to recommend watching a short video on the history of voodoo dolls, or rather poppets, by Willie Muse. Now, be warned, his sense of humor is a little bit dry and unusual, but his video is very thorough and very informative, so I highly recommend that. And also, I know the title for this video says Voodoo Doll Pincushions, but I will be referring to these as poppet pincushions from now on because I find it to be more accurate and respectful, and it's just my personal preference. Alright, let's begin! For a complete list of the materials I used, check out the description box below. I begin by tracing my poppet pattern onto my fabric, using a fabric pen with water-soluble ink. I cut 3 layers of fabric for this pattern. I pin all the layers to make sure that when I cut it with my pinking shears, the fabric doesn't shift. I separate one of the layers and pin the other 2 together. Now it's time to take this to the sewing machine. I only sew along the outer edge of the pattern. Now it's time for painting. I use soft fabric paint to shade the figure of my poppet. With a lighter color, I add some textured highlights. Once the paint is dry, I trace over the design again to make sure I know where I need to sew. And it's another round with the sewing machine. I use a thicker stitch to make sure that the lines are visible. And now it's time to embroider the details. I start with the lashes with a black thread. Then I move on to the stitched eye with a blue thread. Now I embroider exaggerated stitches with a pink thread to resemble a stitched mouth. I sew on a tiny blue button for the eye where the eyelashes were. Back at my sewing machine, I use a swirly embroidery stitch to create textured patches on my poppet. And now I create exaggerated looking stitches in various spots along my poppet. Using a different colored fabric, I cut out a tiny heart shape. I glue it onto my poppet with some Fabri-Tac, and then I add some exaggerated stitches in strategic places. Now I take the fabric layer that we had set aside and place it on top of my poppet. I pinned the pieces together with some clips to make sure the fabric doesn't shift. And it's time for another round at the sewing machine. I make sure to sew all along the outer edges, leaving one space so that I can flip my fabrics inside out. I make sure to be very gentle because I don't want any busted stitches. And now it's time to stuff the poppet. I use a combination of regular pillow stuffing and steel wool. This way, the pins will remain sharp with each use. Once the poppet is completely stuffed, it's time to sew the open edge with a ladder stitch. I use my soft fabric paint again to complete the shading on the opposite side of the poppet and finish up the edges nicely. Now I sew along the edges of the arms and legs to create a dip so that they look more defined. And it's time for another round of exaggerated looking stitches all along the outer edge of my puppet. I loop some yarn and sew it onto the top part of my poppet to create some funky hair. Now I'm going to use a ribbon to create a casing for the slap bracelet. All I have to do is fold the ribbon over the slap bracelet to make sure it's the right length and sew along both sides, leaving one side open to put the bracelet in through. I use the ladder stitch again to close the open edge of my slap bracelet casing. And finally, I stitch the slap bracelet onto the back of the poppet. Now, if you really want one of these, but you don't want to make it yourself, I am selling these on commission. So if you want one for yourself or for that one friend of yours who loves to sew, send me a message on my Instagram, link in the description box below. And we're done! Alright, Creative Fiends, thanks so much for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to keep watching more creative mischief on Tasha's Imaginarium. Until next time, stay fiendish.